where you are tuning in from, or if you are catching us on replay. This is The Awesome Journey, and I am your host, Kelle Steinicke, along with my co-host in care, Christy Howard. And we're just two girls that connected on LinkedIn 15 years ago, live on opposite sides of the country, have giving hearts, a passion for paying it forward, and I may have prayed to be living louder in my purpose. And now here we sit in front of microphones, bringing you The Awesome Journey. And as many of you know, for those of you that are new here, one of our primary goals was to highlight incredible individuals to share their unique stories and challenges because, hey, we all need a reminder that we are all united in our personal journeys. And I say it every week, and I'm going to say it every week because it's always true. We crushed it this week with our guest, Ben Effinger. Effinger. I think I said it wrong already.
I'll take it.
Okay, I'm close. We'll just call him Ben for today. And anyways, Ben is someone that we're so grateful to have here. We met him through the Heare Brotherhood, which we will be talking about. He is the interim CFO for the Heare Brotherhood. He is also a dynamic problem solver for his, and a leader for his local government. I think DC needs a whole bunch of you, Ben, right now. And he is also a doctoral student. So he will soon be Dr. Ben, which I absolutely love. And he is also a veteran advocate and has an incredible journey to share with us today. And we're so blessed, privileged, and honored to have you with us. Thank you for your service, Ben. And before we turn it over to Ben, I will hand it over to my co-host in care, Christy Howard.
Hello. Again, I'm usually on the back end, so you'll see my head looking like a, what is those things, that the bobbleheads? So I'm trying to work that where I'm not bobbling. No, you know, we're huge. Can I say huge again?
Yeah.
You know, supporters of the Heare Brotherhood.
Yes.
And anything that has to do with breaking the stigma of the mental health with men. There you go. There you go. But yeah. Anyway, so if you don't know that part, go check their site, check the guys out. They're so transparent. It's just
incredible.
It just grabs my heart
every time.
So, but Ben has a story, and we actually connected, had to interrupt the conversation because of something that happened on my end, as usual, you know, technical stuff. And then we had to go back because it was such, I mean, it's such a passionate story, but everybody has a story from where we started. We were born and the journey that we continue to go through with the lessons. So the stage is all yours, Ben.
Yes, welcome, Ben.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you. So grateful, humble, you know, honored to be here today with you guys to share my story. You know, as we talked before, you know, everybody's got their own set of circumstances that brings them to a place, but I don't believe in coincidences. I think things happen for a reason, and things are either spiritually or supernaturally placed in your path for you to be able to, you know, either interact with or to steer you down one direction or another. So I believe that there's an influence bigger than me at work in my day-to-day activities. I'm not just the captain of the ship steering it wherever I want to go. We'll get into it down the road, but I just want to share a quote that I learned early in recovery, and it was from a Catholic priest that was in one of my sobriety circles, and he said, "God's will for me would be my will for me if I had all the facts," and that resonates with me because I don't know everything. I can't even begin to fathom everything, but if I knew everything, I would do exactly as he wanted me to do. So that's just something.
Well, we sometimes don't listen to them until it's too late. And then we're like,
well, self-will doesn't do the equation, right? We take over, we take the steering wheel, and we want to drive, right?
That never works out well.
But, you know, back to the beginning of my journey, right? So I was born in northern Wisconsin in a farming community. You know, most of everybody was either farmers or factory workers where I came from. So we had very humble beginnings. I do remember, you know, for summer times just being sent back to my grandfather's farm because, you know, my mom had 7 brothers and sisters, and then there were like 40 something, you know, grandkids, and we would just cycle through, right? Because we were labor, right? So we would get sent back to the dairy farm. They had 80 head of dairy cattle, and we would mend fences, bale hay, you know, milk cows, do whatever on a rotating basis. And that just was summers and, time off from school or whatever the case may be in between life. And my biological parents were together until I was 11, 1995, I think. They got divorced. It came to a point where my biological father just couldn't hold a steady job, and there were a bunch of things going on behind the scenes that as an 11-year-old kid I didn't understand. But one of the things that I internalized is that somehow or another I had something to do with them splitting up. So that was just baggage that I carried for quite a long time. And I do have an older brother. He's a couple of years older than me, I think 3 years older than me, that, he processed things in a totally different way. So he was very quiet, reserved, and shut down. I was very outgoing and boisterous and a big personality to deal with. So we were quite opposite ends of the spectrum. And I didn't realize until later in life how much that divorce had an impact on my trajectory, and the things that I would learn through extended adolescence that would kind of show back up later in life as problems, because it was replicate behavior, right? Because that was how I was, essentially programmed to deal with things. I saw dysfunction, I internalized dysfunction, and that's how you deal with things, is through dysfunction. You don't deal with things in healthy ways. So my mom, shortly after that divorce, started seeing another gentleman. And he was the textbook definition of an alcoholic, right? The book, the AA literature talks about the tornado that comes in and just rips apart your lives, emotionally, physically, spiritually, all of the above. And he was it, right? And by him coming into our lives at a very early age, I started to act out and drink and do the things that I was observing, because I wanted to numb. I wanted to not feel what I was feeling, right? So anytime that I could have a break in my schedule, and a break in the schedule was hard for me, right? Because at an early age, I started working outside the home for money because we were making ends meet. So I was contributing to a household budget. I still was getting decent grades in school. I was playing sports. I was doing all the things that a typical, preteen, teenager, probably about 11, 12, 13, somewhere in that range would do. But then I had this time where whenever I could sneak away, right, it was whoever was old enough to buy the beer, or however I could get my hands on it, or even when I was working, right, somebody had a socket or an apple on the back dock, and we were smoking a bowl in between, working at the restaurant that I worked at in high school. And we seemed to always work better when we had a little bit of a buzz going. And it was one of those things that, I got really good at unhealthy coping mechanisms early in life, because that was, I felt like I was kind of dealt a crappy hand, and that's what I was going to deal with.
Yeah.
So going through all of that, I really, built some really horrible habits for myself, some self-destructive habits that kind of kept me going all through high school. I decided that, I was going to, right before I got out of high school, I was like, okay, there's no more opportunity for me to, be at home. The roads end at factory or factory worker or farmer. There wasn't opportunity to play scholarship sports or anything like that. So I really had to make a decision of what I was going to do. And I figured, okay, I'm going to do some tests. I'm going to join the military, and I'm going to leave. I'm going to go travel the world and do all the things that the military could afford me to do. And even to kind of give my mom like the last stick it to her, in my senior year of high school, she had already signed all of my delayed enlistment paperwork. I could go at any point in time. I just had to finish high school. 9/11 happened in the fall of my senior year. So I got a call from the recruiter basically saying, at any point, you don't have to finish high school. If we go to war, it's on, like you're coming with us because your paperwork's already signed. And then about halfway through that year, I decided I don't want to be at home in this environment anymore. And I can't wait to get myself out the door and on the plane of the military, that I moved out of my house and moved in with a girl before I even graduated high school. Probably one of the worst mistakes of my life, but it was something that, I just perpetuated all of this poor decision making to cope with things. And the girl was an enabler, and I had access to things through her that it just, it became a mechanism to get what I needed to not feel. And that relationship didn't go anywhere. I left for the military and that dissolved, but it was a short-term Band-Aid for the situation that I needed to face. So all of that being said, I graduated from high school June 9th of 2002. And by June 18th, I was on a plane to San Antonio to go to basic training and didn't have to worry about anything before me. Right. You know, I had this brand new start.
All that stuff was going to stay at home, and it wasn't going
to. It was my first geographic of many to come. Right. We learn about that in recovery, that, you know, if we can change people, places, and things, we're good to go. And I geographically picked myself up from Minnesota, went to Texas. I was solid. I didn't have to have any of that stuff come with me. At the time, basic training was the longest I had stayed sober in a long time. And I could tell that I was definitely grouchy and irritable through that entire experience. But, you know,
so did they have like tests? I mean, like drug and alcohol tests while you were in training?
So when I went to basic training, I mean, it's a very controlled environment, so you don't have access to anything. Now, when you go through the military entrance processing station, they call 𝑀PS, before, we were coached up by the recruiters, right? You need to be sober when you walk in there. You can't be coming in off a 3-day bender. Like any, you know, if you're gonna smoke dope, you've got to do it X number of days before, so it's out of your system. You know, like we got the lay of the land, right? Yeah. Like you learned all the things you needed to do to get in the door, right? And then once I got in the door, then there was periodic urinalysis, or, you know, get sent for testing, you know, all throughout my time in the military. And that actually comes to be a part of the story here down the road, because when I got sober, that was a huge piece of it. So I survive everything about basic training, and then I move across base because my job that I had selected was to be a police officer. And the reason that I selected to be a police officer in the military is because I wanted to combat the things that I grew up with, right? The abusive household and all of the things that I was exposed to. You know, I had this paradigm shift that I wanted to be a cop because I wanted to do different than, you know, and help people.
I want to help me.
Right. Exactly. And that was the mindset. So I chose that as a career field. You know, not very well-informed decision, but I just was like, that's what I'm going to do. So past all that with flying colors, decided, you know, the world's my oyster. I'm going to travel. I'm going to do whatever. And my first set of orders that came down after I finished basic training and technical training school was to Minot, North Dakota. And I was like, how miserable is this? They sent me 8 hours from home, because I was in the Twin Cities, the suburbs of the Twin Cities. And I was 8 hours from home. I was guarding nuclear missiles in the middle of nowhere. And I remember in processing there, and there was a young lieutenant that gave us our in briefing, and he said, the Canadian border's like 30 miles north. If you're going to drink, you go over the border. You only got to be 18 to drink in Canada. You get a hotel room, you tie one on, you get sober, you come back across the border, and you're good. And I significantly remembered that that's where I spent a lot of my off time. Was as soon as I didn't have responsibilities.
That was the worst advice he could have ever given you.
Drove to the border, got a cheap hotel room, tied it on in some Canadian moose lodge, and then came back home. And it just that was the cycle for quite a while, for at least the first year that I was up there. Until I developed enough friendships and enough people of age that I knew I could get booze in town, and then I didn't have to go anywhere anymore, because now I was eligible to move out of the barracks. I could move into town, and I had access to everything that I needed. So that also opened the gateway of, you know, running and gunning with every single local female that was in the marketplace, because, you know, not only
isn't that what all military men do when they're starting out?
They do, right? It's par for the course. It's par for the course. And it's so funny, because I had a buddy of mine that lived in the same building as me. We were in the same unit, and he would notice that different days of the week, there would be different cars parked in my assigned parking spot at our apartment complex. We only had one assigned parking spot. And he would notice that when that would happen, I would park my car in guest parking, which was like 2 parking lots over. And
Right.
he got the rhythm down.
You're
He
being a
knew
gentleman.
he knew who was at my apartment by the car that was parked in my stall,
That's
you know,
awesome.
on this
It's a small
rotating
town.
basis.
Yeah.
So,
That's hilarious.
so it just, you know, but it was one of those things, you know, an unhealthy coping mechanism, right? Like I was getting phone calls from my mom while I was in, you know, things were still really crappy with her and my stepdad, you know, just all of this stuff that was happening back at home. And I didn't have the bandwidth to be the white knight to ride in and on my horseback and save the world. So I just need to not feel any of it, right? So I'm drinking, I'm doing whatever, just so that way I don't have to feel the feels, because, you know, emotionally I'm stunted as a early adolescent, and I don't know how to deal with any of that or cope with any of that. So I just rather numb it. So I continued down that path. And that was pretty much my whole time in North Dakota. And at 2 years in North Dakota, I realized I had created enough wreckage, you know, probably because it was a small town and there's only so much you can do.
They all knew your name.
that it was time for me to go somewhere. So I started applying for orders. And, you know, fortunately enough, it was almost like I was leading a dual life, right? Because when I was wearing the uniform and I was doing the job, I was perfect. I was receiving awards, accolations, like doing everything to the nth degree. But then when I hung up the uniform, it was like that Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde flip.
Yeah.
And I was just doing whatever I was doing in my off time. And that led for a really interesting lifestyle, because on one side I looked really polished, but on the other side, if you've ever seen me at the end of a party, you know, I'm hugging the porcelain and just a train wreck. Right. So it really was interesting to see that paradox, you know, kind of unfolding. And that was one of my things that said, okay, well, next geographic, right? I've got to get out of here. It must be this place. This place affords me the opportunity to do all these things. So what do I got to do? I got to go to somewhere where it's even more prestigious. So I left Minot, North Dakota, and I get orders to Andrews Air Force Base, Maryland. I'm going to be working in proximity with Air Force One. So I've got the creme de la creme of duty assignment now. So I'm going to be able to be buttoned up at work, be a professional, and just have this awesome lifestyle. It didn't work that way. I got to Maryland.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you for the fact that we've all had that little thought process.
If we can't laugh at ourselves, we can't make it through.
Exactly.
And I kind of wanted to point out a little, so listening to you say that, it's fascinating too about how we are and how our minds operate, or our brains operate, in the sense of, it's almost like you were so perfect in your job, you did so well in it, as a way to prove the internal voice that continually told you weren't good enough. Like it was trying to disprove it. But then as soon as you were out of it, you were back in the other. I mean, it's just so interesting, right? How and even to look back and be like, dang, how did I do so well in that position when I was
it's like wearing a mask, right? Like we go out in public and we put on this mask. And I was very good at putting on this mask with my uniform and going and being the perfect little airman. But then on the flip side of it, it was just an absolute train wreck. So getting to Andrews,
so back to
getting to Andrews was interesting for me. I was able to take that assignment. You know, I had the clearance levels, I had everything that I needed. And as soon as I got to that assignment, I was like, okay, brand new stomping ground. So what did I do? I embarked in that exact same behavior, right? I'm in the local bar rooms. I'm on, at the time, this was early 2000s. I think I got a profile on Yahoo Personals. Like as soon as I got there, I went to the base library. I didn't even have internet yet. Went to the base library, set up a profile, like all the thing. And I'm just doing the exact same behavior that I had ran away from in North Dakota. I just started it all over again. And in my weekends, I was up in Baltimore running and gunning and doing whatever. And it was just an absolute train wreck. And I was like, okay, well, they're looking for volunteers to go to Iraq. So, you know, okay, I don't have anything tying me down here. So, you know, I've got all my weapons quals. I've got everything that I need. So in early 2005, you know, I had in processed in 2004 to Andrews. Early 2005, I was with a squad and we were headed headed downrange. And our mission was air-based ground defense. The reason that we were sent to this specific location is they had an Army tank battalion that was running an airfield. The airfield got mortared. They didn't repair it. They landed a C-130 on the non-repaired airfield. They landed with the landing gear in one of the potholes, and they bellied the plane out at the end of the runway. So they determined at that point in time that probably an Army tank battalion wasn't the right group to be handling an airfield. So they brought in an Air Force element to be able to run the airfield. So somebody at some level had some common sense to say what they needed to say. So going there was interesting as well, because you would think, you're in a dry country, you're doing a mission, whatever. It's just as easily accessible, right? I mean, it's, you've got third country nationals that are working on your base. The Turkish guys were always good for having some kind of booze around. I mean, it wasn't absolutely unavailable to get your hands on. So we just coped, right? We'd go out and do our missions. We'd come back. There really wasn't anything to do besides go to the MWR and work out, or, go to the chow hall and eat, or go to work. So it just kind of was this hamster wheel that we did for, the time that we were over there. And I remember I turned 21 while I was in the desert, and it's very anticlimactic, because I was like, oh, I should be like, even though I've been hanging out in bar rooms and doing all this stuff, I was finally of age to be able to go and do it. And it was really
which I will say, this is one of the things that baffles me. You have to be 21 to drink. However, 18 to go fight a war and carry a gun and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Yet when you go off to war, you can't drink because you're not 21. That has always baffled me. But go on. It just
absolutely. So turning 21 in the desert was very anticlimactic. And I remember getting, when we came back home, it was later in May. And I was still with, I had started dating my wife. We went on our first date or two, like in January of 2005. I deployed, I came back home, and then, we stayed in correspondence while I was over there. And, we had this bright idea when I got home that we're going to go on a cruise, and we're going to elope to the Bahamas, right? Like that's what, responsible people are going to do. So that's what, I had a noise here, close that. So we got on a cruise boat, we went to the Bahamas, and our first stop in the Bahamas was in Nassau, and we went to the registrar's office. We met with a pastor, and we had, the taxi driver and a British guy that was on vacation with his family, that was in his Speedo doing his thing, were the two witnesses that signed our wedding certificate, right? And he took a bunch of pictures, and we gave him email addresses, and he sent us the email with all the pictures. But that was the beginning of the journey with me and my wife, because I figured, okay, I'm 21 now. I'm supposed to be a responsible adult. Like the next box that we have to check as a responsible adult is we have to get a spouse, right? And then I had like buy the house was like the next one that was coming, and then like have the next generation of taxpayers was the next one, right? Like we're going down the list.
Yes, I didn't follow that one.
Checking the boxes, right? And but this whole time I'm still drinking like a fish, because I just don't want to deal with emotions. So much so that the night that we got married in the Bahamas, we went to Senior Frogs that night in Nassau. And I remember doing the conga lines underneath where they pour the shots in your mouth, because you go underneath with the open mouth. And I remember just being absolutely sauced on that whole trip, and not even having much recollection of what actually occurred, aside from the photos that showed up after the fact. But it was really, I talk about my marriage to my wife, and really the first 2 years was me holding a hostage, right? I love her to death. She stood by me through thick and thin, but that first 2 years of us being married from 2005 to 2007 was absolutely her in survival mode, because she did not know how to handle a fully functioning alcoholic. And she became my alibi, my cover story. Anytime I needed to lie to get out of a situation, or even when I couldn't stand her and needed to pick a fight just so I had some kind of justification to go drink, like that was the whole deal. So at any point in time during that first 2 years, she could have been like, this is not what I signed up for. I am 100% out. I don't think things happen through coincidence. I think things happen for a reason. Like, she's my lobster.
I'm also a true believer that love conquers all.
100%. She is my
Sometimes
lobster.
when
We
you're
are
so in love.
attached for life. So
Yep.
she stood with me, and she is my truth teller. She will tell me what I need to hear, whether I want to hear it or not. And it got to a point in 2007, after several years of just bad, that I was in Texas. I was on a remote mission. I was in plain clothes, carrying a concealed weapon, doing security on a hangar where they were doing top secret maintenance on a jet. And I remember getting a phone call, and it was my mom, and she had divorced my ex-stepfather a couple years prior, and he found out where she was living. He kicked in the door. She tried to call 911. He smashed the phone, and he beat the hell out of her. And I remember getting that phone call while I was in Texas, and I felt absolutely helpless, and I did not like feeling absolutely helpless, because there was nothing I could do to leave where I was at to go try to fix anything or solve anything. So I found myself on a bar stool. And I found myself on a bar stool. And every day I found myself on that bar stool, to a point where I wasn't even going back to my hotel room, checking my weapon before I got to the bar stool. And I remember one distinct night in June of 2007, I stumbled into the lobby of the hotel where my team was staying. And my team leader met me in the lobby. And he was like, something's got to give here. Like, you can't do this. Because not only are you a danger to yourself, you're a danger to others, because you have a loaded weapon on your hip, and all of this stuff is coming to a head. And he gave me the option. He said, we're going home in about a week, and you can go to command and you can tell them that you need help. If you don't tell them that you need help, I'm going to tell them that you need help. And if I tell them that you need help, it's going to be a different outcome than if you tell them you need help.
Well, God bless them.
So at that point, I didn't have an option anymore, right? Like, at that point, that was the moment of clarity I needed to see kind of my military career imploding upon itself after it had been perfect and pristine for all this time. And I was like, I can't let this happen. And
you were
again,
fortunate that you had somebody like that in your life.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Total gift from
Absolutely.
God.
Because sometimes we don't even realize when that angel shows up in our life. We're like fighting them, and they're like, I'm trying to save you.
Absolutely. It's that Eskimo that found me when I was off the path, right? And pulled me back to camp. It was absolutely what I needed to hear when I needed to hear it. And by me going to my command, they were gracious enough to allow me to go to rehab. They put me on TDY orders, so that way the unit didn't know where I was, what I was doing. Everybody thought I was gone on a mission somewhere, and I was just down the street at the hospital on base doing outpatient rehab.
That's great.
And
when you went in to tell them, like, how was that for you to get in through the threshold to say those words out loud?
It was the most uncomfortable and demoralizing situation that I could have ever faced in my life, because my wife was with me when I went to command, because I said, I'm not doing this by myself. You've been with me through this whole thing. So you're going to, if you're up for it, we're going to go and sit. And I remember sitting in front of the senior master sergeant at my unit and saying, this is what's going on with me. And then I remember that we had that meeting. I was on a weekend, I think, because I think I came home over like 4th of July weekend. And then later that week, we met with our first sergeant and the commander, and that's when they signed off on the approval for me to go and self-refer to alcohol and drug rehabilitation. But yeah, looking my command in the eye and telling them, hey, you guys know this guy that's polished when he shows up to work, and this is what the other half of that guy looks like. And it was like telling the world the secret you were going to go to the grave with, right? Yeah. Because they had an option to do with me what they would at that point in time. They didn't have to allow me to go to rehab. I had broken several, military laws and different things. I could have a bunch of different consequences that could have come down the pipe to me. And ultimately, when I finished rehab and got sober, you know, there was a ball and chain attached to that, right? Because now I was still in the military. So they're like, okay, Article 92, suspended bust, you know, it's hanging over top of you. At any point in time, we can breathalyze, take blood, send you for a urinalysis, you know, and if you pop positive on anything, then you're going to get everything that you had coming to you and then some.
Mm-hmm.
So that was essentially the, you know, the stick to keep me on the straight and narrow for the next 3 years, because I was in until 2010, and that was summer of 2007. So for 3 years, I walked that line, right? Knowing that, you know, if I step out of line, there was a consequence. But I remember approaching the time that I was getting out in 2010, and I met with my AA sponsor, and I said, Jeff, I don't know if like it was just a set of coincidences or whatever got me to, you know, where I got to, but, you know, do you think that I need to stay here after I get out of the military? Because at that point, in my opinion, consequences were gone.
Right.
You know, there was nothing over me anymore. I was going to be a civilian. All that stuff was gone. Fresh start, right? Ben was going to be 26 years old, out of the military, and got his whole life ahead of him. He had beaten everything. And I remember in like 3 months, my sponsor and I rapidly worked through the 12 steps and solidified the fact that my butt needed to be in that chair and stay in that chair if I was going to have a shot at a decent life. And that was exactly what I needed at that time. So doing that was another one of my, you know, moments of clarity, right?
Yeah.
You know, having somebody that was willing to walk through that process with me and show me this is exactly where you need to be. And if you decide you need to go back out for some more research and development, it's not going to get better. It's just going to get worse, and it's going to get worse faster.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I would think that those first few years of being sober while still in the military, because generally, you know, they say you need to change your environment, your habits and all of those things. And you went right back into the same thing and had to make different choices.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We had what we called choir practice at the end of shifts, where we would pass the beret towards like the last hour of shift, and then somebody would do a run to the shop at and buy a couple of cases of beer, and we would all meet out at the smoke pit and drink after we got off shift. And I remember the first time that the beret came around to my post, and I was like, I can't put anything in it because I'm not staying. And it was one of those things where it's like, you know, slowly you get into a new habit or new routine of building positive habits and making good choices. But it was so hard to tell people that I had done that same thing with for years, no, I can't do it. And eventually it got to a point where that no wasn't an acceptable answer. And I finally had to tell people where I went for that couple of months that I was gone, and lay out the circumstances that were in front of me for them to get off my back, because it was really not a healthy environment as far as the peer pressure and the camaraderie, because you got to be one of, right?
Yeah.
You know, we've got to be trusted to go to war and have each other's backs. You've got to be able to crack a beer with somebody and, you know, share your deepest secrets, right?
Dang.
Well, and that's when you find out who's going to stand with you and who's not. You know, the peer pressure, it's sort of like, but also what happens, and I've seen it with, you know, other people, and maybe with you, what you were going through, these people are having to look at their own mirror and seeing how they're dealing with their own life, because we all have crap.
Oh yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
And you know, you being, you know, transparent is, you know, even back then, that, you know, we never talked about mental health. So it's like the only reason when you would go to rehab is if you got arrested and stuff like that, and then you'd play the system.
Right. Go get the
But
card.
you always,
right?
You always knew that you wanted to get out of where you were brought up as. However,
didn't know,
you know, you get comfortable. You just get comfortable, and you spiral down, and you spiral down, and you spiral down.
I think people misunderstand a lot of times, though. Being comfortable doesn't mean it's in a pretty place.
Oh no, absolutely not. You can be comfortable in some of the darkest spots.
Yes. I mean, and just seriously, I mean, hats off to you being thrown literally back into the environment that helped perpetuate your addiction. I mean, and then to move on afterwards, you know, then where do you go from there when it is back out? Now you've left the military, and how does that look?
So when I got out of the military, you know, we were fortunate enough to stay in the DC. You know, my wife had a decent job teaching. I landed on my feet at a local community college working in higher education law enforcement. So it just, all the pieces kind of came together for us to sustain our life in the DC area, which was fortunate, because I was able to maintain my sobriety circles that I had built, you know, in the area. We didn't have to do a relocation. I didn't have to get reacclimated. So really it just became, you know, me being more attached to my sobriety community, because now I was out of the military. That was my group of trudge buddies, right? I didn't have to rely on, you know, people that I didn't know at work, or, you know, was building relationships with. I had this other network of individuals to kind of help me get through the process. And that was a blessing for me, because in doing that, I was able to have like a safety blanket and a sense of stability, along with this transition that I was going through of taking the uniform off and then becoming a civilian. And, you know, I was able to get a decent job in that area, you know, promote a couple of times, and, you know, everything was great until January of 2012. You know, I'd been out for about a year and a half. We had found our groove. You know, at that point in time, my youngest son was 2. You know, I was figuring out kind of how to do life sober, right? Just kind of rewriting the narrative. And I remember we get a phone call from my mother-in-law, and my father-in-law was in his preliminary diagnosis with Parkinson's. And we're like, oh crap, right? Like they're on the West Coast, they're in Southern California. You know, we're in Maryland. You know, we had bought a house in Maryland. We had kind of made our life there, for lack of a better phrase. And I remember hanging up the phone that night, and my wife and I looked at each other and we said, we got to go. And that was all we said to each other. And at that point, that was when the wheels started turning. And in 6 months, we had our whole life packed up in Maryland. We had our house on the market to rent it out. And we were driving cross country, 2 cars loaded down, a potty training 2-year-old. And we're driving coast to coast from Maryland to California, because there was just something about the way that information was delivered to us that we wanted to be in Southern California to be of service to my father-in-law and my mother-in-law while we went through this journey. So that was probably the biggest leap of faith in the world, because we literally didn't have jobs lined up in Southern California, didn't have a place to stay. We moved in with my in-laws. We just literally said, here we are. We're here to help. We're probably more of a burden than we are a help, but we're here. And by
but
doing
you
that,
also understood, you were at where you were, that there's a reason why we're supposed to do this. We might not have all the, you know, pegs in the place and stuff like that, but we're just going to jump and we're going to do, because we do it together.
absolutely. Another one of those things that it's not a coincidence that information was delivered to us, right? That was something that was placed in our path to see how we respond to it. And we could have easily said, okay, we'll stay in Maryland and we'll just fly back a couple times a year.
Right.
It wasn't what we wanted, because we knew the nature of Parkinson's being what we had learned about it, that he was going to decline. We had a couple of good years that we could take advantage of before he starts to decline. So we wanted to be close, so my son could develop a relationship with him, so he could, you know, we could have good memories and do what we needed to do. And that was the sole driving force. So in 2012, we moved coast to coast. And at that point in time, you know, I didn't mention that in that period of when I got out of the military to 2012-ish, my wife and I decided we were both going back to school. So we both went back to school for our master's degrees at the same time. So we were working full time, both of us, you know, had a 2-year-old, and we were doing the master's degree thing, because we're as sick as it is, we're high achievers to the nth degree. So we just continued to want to do. right? So I was getting my master's degree in public administration. I always wanted to work in government. She was getting her master's degree in special education because she was a school teacher, and she just absolutely loved those kids that she worked with. So juggling, we had to juggle that on the move as well, because we had to finish those classes as we moved cross country to still be able to complete those degrees.
Dang.
So it was definitely a juggling act as everything kind of the pieces came together. But by end of 2012, she had finished her degree. By beginning of 2013, I finished my degree. And, at that point, a door opened for me to pivot into local government. And that's where I would think my passion, grown up Ben found his passion for advocating for veterans in local government.
I like that, grown up Ben.
Yeah.
There was a long time where Ben wasn't a grown up, and Ben had to really humble himself at 29 years old to take a 2-year paid fellowship to pivot into local government and, kind of be an intern for 2 years to be able to cement his place in government. But it all, again, everything happens for a reason. And then really finding out that there is a synergy between the knowledge, skills, and abilities that veterans possess and the lack of depth in the local government succession planning pool, that just creates a perfect marriage. And that's really what I've poured a lot of my effort into in the years of late, is just getting involved with different municipal organizations and building those bridges between, the DoD Skills Bridge program and local agencies to be able to create a pipeline for folks that are getting out of the military, just like I was, not really knowing what you want to be when you grow up, but giving them a stable career path and track into local government, so that way they can use their skills anywhere from public works to, being a cop or a firefighter or doing admin or finance. Anything you could have done in the military, you can do in local government. So it's just creating that pipeline and really showing the fruits of that, right? The flip side of it is showing local government that you're hiring a capable individual. You're not hiring damaged goods to meet a quota. Because some folks see, oh, it's a disabled veteran, or it's, I have to have X number of veterans on my staff to meet some survey that I have to fill out, or something that's expected of me, right? So we just need this bucket of tokens over here. And it doesn't have to be that. There are perfectly capable and individuals that will blow your mind with the skill sets that they can bring to the table, that can be an asset to your agency from day one.
Yes. And I think one of the things that we probably didn't really hit on is you talking about the transition and how to transition into work afterwards, because you even had quite the difficulty on your transition. If you want to.
Yeah, we can take a step back really quick. So the transition in a nutshell for me was, I knew I was going to get out in 2010. And I remember March of that year, I got a set of orders to take a squad back to Iraq. And at that point, it was me and my wife, and my son was, I think, right around 8 or 9 months old at the time, my oldest. And I decided, I don't know that I can do this again. I had other folks from my unit that went to Afghanistan. They were running convoy operations. One of their convoys got hit by an IED. Buddy of mine came back and just wasn't the same person. He wasn't physically harmed, but mentally he just wasn't the same person.
Right.
And I wasn't willing, he had young kids. He didn't interact with his kids the same. I just wasn't willing to roll that dice, especially at the end of my contract. So I declined the orders. And by doing that, I set forth in motion, a series of events where the military was like, okay, you're no longer useful to us. So we're just going to put you on the express track out. So I thought I was going to be in with a secure job until November of 10. And I woke up on July 1st of that year as a civilian. I got fast tracked out of the service. So essentially I had from middle of April through June to find a civilian job. It was like 70 something days when you add it all together to find a job on the outside.
Mind change. That's a huge mind change. It's sort of like, it's not like,
I thought I had like 6 months
going to a blonde. It's like, okay, I'm not military. I'm not, this is not what I am
that I can get on, that I have to do in order to do this successfully, instead of just bye-bye.
Yeah, it was just, we don't have a use for you anymore. There's no need for you to hang around if you don't want to do what we want you to do. You're not willing to extend or re-enlist to take these orders and go back on deployment. So
Good luck.
bye.
Yeah.
Peace
So
out.
it left a bad taste in my mouth for quite a few years, but I got over that, and part of me getting over that was actually years later, a Marine buddy of mine drugged me to the VA and forced me to do my benefits and compensation claim because, at 26, when I got out, I wasn't broken. I wasn't, I wasn't willing to admit that there was anything wrong. So, 10 plus years after that, I finally got drugged into a VA facility and filled out all my paperwork and did everything, because at that point in time, it was no longer about me. It was about what my family is entitled to because of my service.
Yeah.
My
Oh,
kids
absolutely.
get free tuition. There's health care. There's a bunch of things that they're entitled to as, my spouse and my children. It's not about, whether I'm worried about being labeled as disabled or not.
Dang. And I just, the reason I wanted to go back on that is just because I think it definitely exemplifies the fact of why it was so passionate for you to want to help veterans getting out and getting them into work, maybe that they wouldn't have thought of to begin with, but just helping them because of your experience, which I think is so beautiful. And I guess now as we transition from there is maybe we go now into, how did you meet the boys of the Heare Brotherhood?
Absolutely. So in part of my recovery journey, right, like as you're doing step work and as you're looking at yourself and doing self-reflection, right, like mental health became much more of a priority, as my sobriety kind of matured, right? Because you go through these phases of physical sobriety, just breaking the habit of, the drink, to, your emotional and your spiritual sobriety and how things mature. And then it gets to a point where, your mental wellness really comes into an integral piece of doing that on a daily basis. And, I've been very vocal about, how my PTSD has impacted my journey and how my recovery has impacted my journey. And when I look at all of that in a nutshell, I just started seeing things in my LinkedIn feed about this Heare Brotherhood. And I don't know how I started seeing things, but there was an attraction to it immediately, right?
Yeah.
And again, this was, part, the Brotherhood itself, has its roots back somewhere of the turn of this year. There were some conversations in like early January, February. The app didn't come online until I think May, so it's very much in its infancy, but I started seeing towards late spring, summertime, this thing showing up in my feed. And, they had some really dope merchandise that was going to drop. And I remember messaging Justin and saying that I was going to camp out on the sidewalk, for merch, just like they do. And like they have iPhone releases and stuff like that. And like some banter started. And, I just got really interested in the concept of itself of having a safe space for dudes just to not have the mask on that society expects us to have, of just being that stoic individual.
Yes.
That, nothing phases us, right? Like we have a duty to ourselves and to our brothers to make sure that, we have a space that it's okay to not be okay. And we don't have to constantly be the rock for everybody in our spheres or our circles. And that was really the gravitational pull for me, was this space of individuals that, I don't know any of these people, they're from Utah, Virginia, all over the country. And I get into this space and, some of the first conversations that are taking place are, oh, let's do a mental health check-in and rate yourself on a scale. And are you feeling bad today? And what are you feeling bad about? Or, these various other threads of conversation are happening. And it was very organic. It was very it wasn't a production.
Right.
And a lot of times we feel like it has to be a production if we're going to put it out there, because people are going to be cynical and criticize everything that we have to say. And in this space, it didn't have to be manicured and produced. It could just be whatever raw emotion that you were sitting with or whatever you were experiencing in life. Different topics in the app are, divorce, struggling with self-acceptance, addiction and recovery. I mean, you name it, that we're not happy with, choices that we made or parenting choices that we made, you absolutely the gambit of things that you don't just show up, with a group of men at the sidelines of a football game and be like, hey, dude, like I yelled at my kid the other day and I feel awful, right? You just, there isn't a space for that out in the world.
Right.
And so by getting involved in the app, I was seeing this organically happening, and the app is taking on a life of itself. And, we're seeing members join and more engagement. And I remember getting a message from Justin, and he said, I didn't even realize that your background was in like finance. He's like, but we really need a CFO. Would you be interested in leaving government and coming to work with us? I was so honored, but I texted him back immediately. I was like, I'm not even going to give you a number, dude, because I just don't even.
You can't afford me.
Like we can't.
Right.
We can't go there.
Remove zeros.
It was really like a thanks, but no thanks. But I'm really on. I'm invested 110% in what we're doing. Like we're good, right? So I just continued to be part of the app. I had become a mentor in the app and was engaging with different folks, and it started to snowball. And lo and behold, just in a couple months, I think it was like 2 months later, he's like, dude, we're in dire need of a CFO. And we're like going to talk to folks about funding and venture capital and all these kind of things. And like, we're all creatives, dude. We need somebody that knows how to.
We need you in our pitch deck, man.
He's like, we all have grand ideas of where this thing is going, but not one of us can balance a checkbook. Like, we need your help. So I got to a point where I told him, I would come on with the Brotherhood, and I would do everything that I'm doing pro bono, because I don't want it to be a conflict of interest with my primary job. I didn't want to fill out all the paperwork for conflict of interest and all the things that I would need to do for my job, because, as a high-ranking government official, I've got to disclose all my financial interests and all of these different things. So I said, I'll do it. I'll do the work, but I'll come on 100% pro bono, because I don't want to have any ties back to that impact my current job. We'll just make it work. So that's kind of where we got to today. And, we recently converted the organization from an LLC to a C Corp in Utah. So that allows us to, engage with venture capitalists to be able to trade equity in the company for, investment funding up front. So we're really on the lip of the cup of like some really amazing things.
Christy and I have already talked about, we're like, and I've said this because for those of you who didn't know, or for those of you that do know, we did have all the co-founders. We had Justin, Michael, and John on, and of course, great episode. We'll share that link. And you lost my train of thought because you started laughing. So
I'm sorry, because Michael was making
Mike chimed in the chat, and I'm sorry, Mike. You are a professor. I understand that.
I was going to say he's the professor.
He can balance a checkbook. He's probably the most balanced of the three creatives.
I don't recognize him without a beard, though. That was quite the change. I will admit.
When he had to shave the beard, he had to. I don't know if you saw his open letter on LinkedIn, but he professed, his emotion that was, involved in this professional decision that, the professorship forced him to shave the beard. And now he's just,
I think is complete BS, but
he's competing with Justin now with the awesome bro stash.
Yes. And Justin's got the Incredible Hulk action happening. Or
well,
not the Incredible Hulk, Hulk Hogan, I'm sorry.
Hulk Hogan. He's prepping for Halloween. He's going to bleach it multiple times to get the right
doing the Hulk
shade.
Hogan thing. Like, that's what I'm thinking. And I remember what I was going to say with all of that. It was when Christy and I first talked with all the co-founders, the Heare Brotherhood. And after we did the episode, we, of course, were like, man, we're going to be able to sit here and go, we remember them when. Like, this is just, because it's magical. I think, honestly, how they've been, all of you, how you've come together truly so organically and so by the grace of God, how the whole thing came together. It was never about making money. It was about helping other men, which, I mean, that alone, and for you to say to them, I will do this pro bono, is almost like a bigger testimonial for what they're doing of your belief in them. No, man, I'll do this work for free. That's how much I believe in what's happening here, which makes it even cooler. So I did remember.
Absolutely. And it's, just watching it take root and grow, right? When I joined, there were, I think 285 folks on the app or something like that. We keep ramping up. We're approaching 2,000 folks on the
so
app.
cool. And you're global now.
And it's global. I think we're in 28, if I'm not mistaken. John will be able to tell me the exact number, but I think we're in 28 different countries.
That is so cool.
Awesome.
It's just absolutely amazing. And all of this has happened organically.
It's needed.
Yep.
This is needed.
So much.
It is very much needed, but it's all been organic. Like, we're not running ads in marketplaces. We don't have billboards on the side of the road. It's basically all happened through a couple of guys in their LinkedIn feeds, and this thing has caught on fire. So when we actually put some intentional marketing, out there in the world, I can only imagine that the top's going to blow off of this.
What's interesting is, I think I just lost, but anyway, that
Catching.
You all share, LinkedIn has changed. I mean, when we got on, it was all business, and now it's very showing the personality, showing life stories. So other people, because mental health is so important.
Yeah.
It is like so important. And how Kelle and I, with this show, we started with this and then go there and that, we're women, we go all over the place. However, it just continues to go where we are. Yes, we're all about the mental health, but we continue to say that the women have the Facebooks, the wine clubs, men don't have a place. And our show tends to just really resonate, even with Crystal on last week. It was about the vets and about the suicides of getting the wheelchairs. And we're booked until mid-January. Every person has a journey that somebody else can resonate to. And that's what's so cool. But I don't know if he's going to watch this, but anyway, my husband, I kept on saying, come on, download this, come on, it's a place for you to, bond with men.
Yes.
And so I found out that he had downloaded it. And so I was like, well, because I'm all about, let me show you how to work it, because that's just who I am. And I had to stop myself, because it's like, it's not my place to go into that app.
Right.
And trust me, it was hard. Absolutely. It was hard. I really wanted to go in, but it's not my place. I needed to respect the brotherhood. I needed to respect my husband. I needed to respect all the men in there. Yeah. That it's not my place as a female, though I think it's a fabulous concept, because you are helping us, wives, mothers, sisters, friends. But it was just sort of like, I can't get in there.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of it, right? Is knowing, because I think, some people would be like, oh, it's only for men. Yes, it's only for men. And because if you throw, and this goes same for, church groups, there's always women's church groups and men's church groups. And the reason being is men speak differently when their partner, their spouse, whoever is with them. When a female is in the room, you speak differently than when they're not. And that's just a fact. And so that's the beauty of the whole thing. And it's not a brotherhood. They're not, it's not a frat club situation.
What was the He-Man Woman Haters Club?
Yes, secret knock to get into the door.
Absolutely.
But I mean, the stories that you guys have shared, because I will say, when John, Justin, and Mike were on, that was one of the most emotional ones. Like I sobbed.
Yeah, I cried. I never cry.
Never cries. But it's because of the raw, real stories. And that's what people need to hear. And and our feeling was, even doing this show, is, I'm like, I just want to add a little light, love, motivation, inspiration, and hope into the world, because it feels so dark everywhere we turn. And in people's stories, someone, because we're all going through something, and it is so exacerbated in so many different ways right now, is someone's going to be on the outskirts, on the fray, or in the periphery, that's never going to comment, never going to do anything, but they're going to hear something. And that little thing that they hear is going to make a difference in their life. And maybe it's going to take them a week or two before they go, I'm going to go to the Heare Brotherhood and check out this app. Or I'm going to go to the App Store and check it out. I'm going to log into it and check it out and just watch what happens. That's just progress that needs it, because I think people, like you were, alluding to before, is just being blown away about what's talked about, and that it is just so authentic. It's men talking about real shit that they need to be talking about, and to be able to go, man, I'm not alone. I wasn't the only one that was feeling this way. Because you're right.
Those are some of the most profound experiences that I've taken away from the app and the community itself is folks that, have signed up, have become part of us, but they've just kind of been a wallflower for 2-3 months, and they're diligently reading everything that's happening, all of the different feeds, all of the different spaces we've got within the app. But then one day they will open up and they will tell us, hey, I've been hanging out on the side and I've been watching the mental health check-ins every day and reading all of the comments about where everybody's good, bad, and indifferent. But now I'm finally ready to jump in and do my piece or talk about my stuff. And it doesn't happen day one for some folks.
Right.
Some folks, they come in, and we've got folks that have signed up for the app that have never engaged, but they're part of the community. And on the backside, when we look at the metrics, we can tell they're logging into the app every day. They're opening it and they're scrolling through it, but they're not posting comments. They're not doing different things. They're not engaging, but they're physically there.
Right.
And it's no different than in recovery, right? Like a lot of times somebody will come in and they will just sit in the back of the room.
Yep.
They won't speak. They won't identify. They won't, but through osmosis, they keep coming into that room and they gain that courage to be able to speak up and become a part of.
Yeah.
Well, and also it's like this, even on LinkedIn or any social media as well, it's a silent scroller. And for the fact that you all, Mike and all of you, and even people that are open about being part of the Brotherhood, sharing their stories on LinkedIn. I mean, they're raw, and it's just, because it's changed, because one, that is business. I mean, you're helping people understand their mental health to be able to be successful personally and professionally.
Yeah.
But people are going to be scrolling that, and then all of a sudden they're going to be like, I like these guys. I want to check this out, because you're getting to know them.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that Kelly will agree with me. I could just hang out with you guys because I feel like I've known you.
Yes.
I've known you guys. You guys know us. We know you. We just hang out.
Yes, I think I made John. Well, I didn't make him, but on one of my posts, and he's like, you and Christy are honorary Brotherhood members. And I'm like, thank you. We are. We just invite them.
But I'm not going into the app. I'm just telling you. I will not go into the app.
Oh, I won't either.
Nope.
I won't either. But I will.
Yeah, but I can.
Yeah,
I mean,
we will cheerlead for it
go.
forever, because it is freaking incredible, and the world needs it. And I'll say, as much as we can sit back and be like, wow, this app has taken off and is in all of these places already in such a seriously short period of time, it makes you go, wow, that is so needed, but it's so past being needed. And I had another conversation with another gentleman that's doing a different type of thing. And I was like, dude, the market is not saturated. There could not be more. His isn't an app, but definitely it's men's mental health support. And I'm like, I don't think we could have too many. Like, it's just, it's so.
And we don't look at it, we've had conversations internally. We don't look at it as competition, right? Like anybody that comes into this space, we will welcome them with open arms, or we can collaborate on things. We're 100% about it, because, that just extends our reach, right? No matter if it's our community, if it's somebody else's community, if we can draw more people in that are willing to, start to do some self-reflection and open up about the stuff that they're carrying around, then it's a win for everybody.
Yeah, I love that. And I know we could talk to you all day, Ben, and that's true. And I know I say that every time too, because our guests are just rad. I can't help it. And I love them. So, but I know we're just past the hour. So as we sort of wrap, what is it that you would like to wrap with, and how can our audience help you? How can they contact you, get the app, and all that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. So personal note, to go very back to the beginning, right?
Yeah.
That priest that told me God's will for me would be my will for me if I had all the facts.
Yes.
So write that down, put it in a notebook somewhere.
Yes.
Ruminate on that a little bit, because it definitely has a lot more power than just the words that are in that sentence. The Heare Brotherhood if you are interested in checking us out, we are in the App Store. We are in the Android, the Google. I think it's the Google Play Store. I don't know. I'm not an Android person, but we're in both. We're in both app stores. Download us. There's a quick intro where you have to answer a couple of questions for us. You have to agree to sign our oath. Our oath is our code of being our brother's keeper and showing up no matter what. Scroll through it. If it looks appealing to you, sign the oath, answer the questions. Once we get the application on the app, then we'll scroll through it. Obviously, we do some screening to make sure we're keeping folks, in that want to be in, and not letting any girls like Christy and Kelly in. Then we let you in, and then you've got access to the community. Come and join us. If you're interested in connecting with me, go ahead.
Yeah. Also note that the website is 𝘎𝘰𝘥'𝘴.com.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
It's not Brotherhood.
Yeah, and we'll put the link in the comments and in the post promos as well.
Yes, here, HEARE. Yes. And if you want to connect with me personally, professionally, I am all over LinkedIn. You can find me. That's primarily my only social media app. I don't do Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I just stay out of those realms because nothing but bad has ever materialized from me being in those spaces. So you can find me on LinkedIn. If you're interested about any of the content that I post or any of the articles that I post professionally, happy to dive into those. If you're interested in a career in local government, let's talk. But just absolutely honored and privileged to be here with you ladies today and share just a slice of my story. Hopefully that can resonate with some folks.
Love it. Christy?
Absolutely. Appreciate you. You know that. I mean, next time we're going to have everybody on.
Yes.
Why not? Fill the room up with us.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
I love it.
But no, I mean, I love your story, and I just love what you guys are doing and, what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're sharing.
Yes. So again, so grateful to have you, Ben, and glad to call you friend. I mean, it's been wonderful getting to know you, and we're so grateful that you came to share your story and share the Heare Brotherhood, which Christy and I can't be bigger cheerleaders for. There's not many things we scream from the rooftops on. Wheelchairs for Warriors last week and the Heare Brotherhood are the two that we cannot say enough about. We love you guys. We're your sisters. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us. If you do have any questions, please do connect with Ben. Send him any questions that you may have. And we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at 1:11 p.m.
And we have Scott coming back because he's moved to Texas.
No. Super pumped. So yes, it'll be another great guest. And I'll be like, we have another rad guest. Imagine that.
Imagine that.
Until then, hey, we're all on this journey together. And together we do make it awesome. Have a great day, everyone.